What's happening, y'all? So I got this knife. It's up to this point where it's sanded, the handle is polished. Still need to put a maker's mark on it, and I'm gonna etch it. So I wanted to make a video since I've had a lot of people ask me how I do my etching process, how I make them look old, and I figured it'd just be easier to make a video. So I'm gonna take this and make it look old. Yeah, that's the goal. So anyway, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean this up really good, and then I'm gonna put my maker's mark on it. So to do my maker's mark, I use a process called electro-etching, and what I'm gonna use is one of my stencils. I don't know if I can get it to focus on that or not, but this is, yeah, it's not gonna focus. So to put my maker's mark on, I use a process called electro-etching. So what I'm gonna do is take my stencil here, and I'll clean up the knife blade, and I'll tape that on there real good, and then I'll show you that process. But I'll clean it up real good, then I'll show you that process. So I'm gonna take a paper towel with acetone on it, and I'm gonna clean this up real good so that I don't have any residue from my fingerprints or any oils or WD-40 or any crap on there. Get this real nice and clean. Wipe it off. So I'll take this stencil and I'm gonna tape it on there. Make sure that it's aligned well so that I can make sure it's nice and straight. And then I'll make a border around that so that I only etch through the stencil and get my maker's mark on there, and don't etch around the edge of it and put a big rectangle on the knife, because that's not what I want for sure. So there's that all set up and ready to be etched. So in this process of electro-etching the maker's mark, one thing that I use, so I use an old tattoo power supply, 12 volt, sorry, power supply from actually I bought it from a crackhead trying to sell tattoo equipment. I bought it to just get it off the street. So I have one side of the wire, it comes down, it goes to a ground, which I just use a set of clips so I can clamp onto the blade. And then the other wire goes to this bolt that I rubber band a felt pad to, and the wire is soldered to that. And then I have a little jug of salt water I use here, and I'll show you that process. So to put my ground on, I'm going to use the clips, clip it to the end of the blade here, and all it has to do is make contact with it, and then I'll salt water and my little dauber made out of the felt on the end of the bolt there, and then I'll turn this sucker on. Now there are fancier methods, they're more expensive methods, but this method actually works really, really well. So what I'll do is put that on there, and what that does is where the water makes contact with the blade, the salt water, it makes an electrical contact and it'll burn through the stencil. The stencil is made out of a screen. It has you know, the lettering cut out. It's pretty small. I was pretty surprised. I actually have two sizes, and this makes a this is the larger one. I have a smaller one. The letters are tiny, and they look really nice and clean. Make sure I got a good contact. Make sure all my wires are on there nice and tight, since this one's not soldered. And I kind of got to be careful. I got to dip it a few times to make sure that I don't burn my stencil, because it can just burn the screen itself, and then the stencil won't burn through. I want to make sure that I got it completely burned in there, so I don't miss any corners of the letters. And I want to make sure I get it nice and deep. I like to make sure they're deep because I'm going to do an etching on this with the ferric chloride, and it does kind of obscure the maker's mark some. So, all right. So now I'll pull this off here. I like to double check it before I pull it all the way off. Yeah, looks good. So then these stencils, as long as they're not burned, they can be reused. And sometimes I can get 50 knives engraved. So there's what it looks like with the engraving. And you can see has got residue on it from the tape and stuff. But I'll throw that on the buffer for just a second and clean that up and show you what that looks like. After it's been polished up and cleaned up, you can see it's burned in there. It's actually 3D. And yeah, that looks nice and crisp. I dig it. So, got the maker's mark on there. The first thing I'm going to do is clean this thing up really good. More paper towels with acetone on it. Make sure I clean it up. Especially at this one, I'll make sure I get all the residue off of it, get all the fingerprints off of it, so none of that transfers as through to the etching. You know, if you put something, it can etch it, but you can put a resist on there. So if I put a big thumbprint on the blade and then I etch the blade, it'll actually etch everything around it and leave my thumbprint in there. So we want to clean that off really, really good, and make sure that all of it's nice and clean so it doesn't have any fingerprints on it, no oils on it. Yeah, you got to really, really, really clean it good. So I should probably wear gloves, but I don't. Once I get it cleaned up, I'll only touch it by the wood, which doesn't etch. And to be honest, that's one thing that I do. It's maybe different than what some people do also, is I will etch an entire knife, handle and all. Sometimes, especially with the lighter woods, it will absorb some of the ferric chloride and affects the color of it. But that's just another one of the things that I really kind of dig about the way my knives come out is when the handles soak up some of the ferric chloride. It darkens them. It makes them look really cool. So it kind of goes with the aesthetic that I like to have with them. So I'm gonna get this thing nice and cleaned up, and then the first step in when I etch is I use ferric chloride at full strength, and I use a paintbrush. I'll show you what that does. So as I brush this on here, you can see how it got darker, especially towards the cutting edge where the harder steel is. So after I've gotten it etched at full strength, you can see the ferric chloride's on there. If it's got any spots that you can see that aren't even, like if it has a fingerprint on it or has a spot that it's not etching, what you can do at that point is take some steel wool and you can scour this and get it all nice and even again, and the ferric chloride You can usually get it to even itself out. So the next step I do is I put it into a ferric chloride bath. And that's one thing I do a little different than some knife makers is I actually do I'll put the whole knife in, handle and all. And I have, you see the tube goes through here. This has got ferric chloride that's mixed 50-50. It's 50% water, 50% ferric chloride. And I'll do the same thing here to make sure I don't have any scum on top or any particles on top. I'll dip it in there and make sure I mix it up good, make sure everything looks nice and even. And then I'll just let that hang in there. Let's put this right on top of my vise because you would not believe how many times I've put a knife in there and forgotten about it. And ferric chloride will eat it. It'll eat all the way through it. It'll eat the whole knife. If I left it in there long enough, it would just eat the whole knife. There would be nothing in there. He'd pull it out and be like, what happened to the knife? It's gone. Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll let this soak in here for about 5 minutes. I'll check it about every 5 minutes. I usually try to let them soak about 10 minutes, about 15 minutes. That really helps even everything out. It gives it time for it eats the steel more where it's not hardened, so you can see the Hamon line where the differential between the hardened steel and not hardened steel is from the differential quench. What I'll do next is, you have to stop the acid process. So I use both. I'll wash it with baking soda. I'll rinse it off. I'll scrub it with baking soda really good, and then rinse that off, and then I actually scrub it again with just soft towels and Windex. So I've got this rinsed off with water. I'll put baking soda on it, and just a touch of water, kind of make a paste, and then I just kind of give it a good rub down. And this does remove some of the oxidation, some of the blackness off of it, but it helps even everything out a little bit too. And it helps to make sure that you've got it all stopped, all the etching process stopped, so that it's not going to eat the blade anymore. So, and this knife's not sharp yet. That's the last step I do when I finish a knife. So I'll actually get it etched, get it cleaned up, make sure everything's just right like I want it. The last thing I do is etch it, or sharpen it. And I'll make a sheath after that while it's sharp. I just be careful with it. It doesn't bug me. So yeah, we'll get this thing cleaned up here real good. And then I'll rinse it off in water again. So she's looking so far. You can see the maker's marks on there. It's harder to see, but it is on there. It's funny because I had a couple people in the last couple weeks say, oh, you didn't put a maker's mark on my knife. It's on there, trust me, it's on there. You may have to look at on a loop to find it, but it is on there. Yeah, I'll just polish this up a little bit. Make sure I got all of the acidic process to stop so it's not etching it anymore. And I'll wash it off in water again. I like to blot it dry because before I put some Renaissance wax on it, you can still get fingerprints on it. You can still get scratches in the etching itself, the oxidation. And I'll get a little video of it here so you can see how it looks now and the difference between now and when we started.